In the 7th year of our marriage, I finally made up my mind to leave with my daughter from the wife who never loved us. Unexpectedly, the night before our departure, a big fire broke out in our house. As a result, I had to get an artificial heart, and my daughter permanently lost a kidney. At that moment, my wife appeared at our hospital beds, crying and saying she couldn't bear to lose us again. My daughter threw herself into her arms crying, and I decided to give her 52 chances, only if she could truly change for the better. However, when there was only one chance left, I saw her chat history with her assistant. Mr. Su, I've destroyed all evidence of the arson and sent the person abroad, but Miss Nian seems to be having some kidney rejection issues. It's fine. I've already got that father and daughter under control. If Nian isn't feeling well, and then still has another kidney to give her. I stared at this scene in disbelief. It turns out my wife's heart had never changed. She only loved her first love and his child. In that case, what's the point of my daughter and I staying here? Outside the ward, Su Qian was seriously reviewing the reports sent by her assistant. She didn't know that her WeChat messages had been synced to the tablet she left on the hospital bed. How's Zhao? Is Zhou Jin's heart showing any signs of rejection? No, but Ms. Su, illegal transplantation is a crime. I'm worried if this ever gets exposed, the whole group will be ruined. Enough. Don't worry about that. Just take care of the cleanup work. Zhou Jin and his daughter are stupid. They're completely in the dark about my deception. But Ms. Su, the truth can't stay hidden forever. What if one day your husband and daughter find out the truth? Stop worrying unnecessarily. They only trust me. Reading the chat history on the tablet, my eyes turned red and my body began trembling uncontrollably. So this was the real reason behind my wife's apparent change of heart. Bai Zhou and Bai Nian were sick, and Anin and I happened to be perfect organ donors for them. Even though I now have an artificial electronic heart installed, I still feel waves of spasms, as if countless arrows are piercing through it. My daughter's quiet sobbing reaches my ears, but I dare not lift my head to look at her. I can never forget that day when my daughter woke up in the hospital bed, crying and asking me why she could never run again. That was her favorite sport. I thought it was my negligence that caused the fire. Seeing my daughter so weak, I even wished I could immediately dig out my own kidneys for her. However, who would have thought that the perpetrator of all this was Su Qian? She was my wife of 7 years, Anin's biological mother. Dad, why did Mom do this? Does she hate us that much? Anin looked up at me, her eyes becoming dim and lifeless. My heart Ly ached even more. Indeed. Why? Just for Bai Zhou and Bai Nian? Will Anin and I be hurt like this? I could no longer control my emotions, holding my daughter in my arms as tears poured out uncontrollably. Just then, the hospital room door was suddenly pushed open. Seeing the state of Anin and me, Su Qian was startled. What's wrong with you two? Why are you both crying? A flash of worry and anxiety crossed Su Qian's eyes as she strode towards the hospital bed. Hearing this, I suppressed the grief and anger in my heart, pretending as if nothing had happened, and shook my head. It's nothing, just feeling happy that we can go home soon after being discharged. Really now, how old are you? Acting like a child. Su Qian glanced at me reproachfully. Then she sat down on the edge of the bed and lovingly held Anin in her arms. Look at our Anin, crying until her face looks like a little cat's. As she spoke, Su Qian gently wiped away the tears from Anin's face with her fingers. Her gentle and caring demeanor resembled that of a mother deeply in love with her child. If we hadn't seen the chat history, perhaps Anin and I would never have seen through her masterful acting. How was it? You were gone for quite a while. Did the doctor say anything? I asked, my eyes fixed firmly on Su Qian's phone. No, nothing. Su Qian shook her head nervously. I just spent some extra time consulting with the doctor about healthcare tips. This way, I can take better care of you and Anin when we get home. Is that so? I paused for a moment, then continued. Thank you. No need to be polite. This is what I should do. Su Qian said while picking up the luggage with one hand and holding Anin with the other. Let's go home, honey. Su Qian continued playing the role of a caring mother. But she failed to notice that her daughter couldn't keep up with her pace and hadn't even spoken a word the entire way. On the way home, the car was extremely quiet, and my daughter and I kept staring out the window blankly. Just as we were about to arrive home, Su Qian suddenly broke the silence. Anin, don't you feel lonely being home alone every day? Would you like Mommy to find you a playmate? After saying this, Su Qian looked at me. Honey, do you remember Bai Zhou who gave us a huge wedding gift when I got married? I heard he's returned to China with his daughter. I was thinking since he doesn't have any relatives here, why don't we show some hospitality and invite them to stay at our place? Our place? I glanced at Su Qian expressionlessly. Yes. Su Qian's eyes flashed with uncertainty. I just thought they could keep you and Anin company. If you don't agree, then forget it. Let them come, I said calmly. Hearing this, Su Qian happily hugged me. Honey, you're so kind. Marrying you was the best decision I've ever made in my life. Marrying her was the worst decision I've made in my life. After dropping us off at our doorstep, Su Qian left. Watching the car disappear into the distance, I couldn't help but give a bitter smile. Was he really that eager to go find Bai Zhou and Bai Nian? I held my daughter in my arms and walked towards our home. As soon as we entered the bedroom, my daughter threw the small box from the desk into the trash bin. It was the gift her mother gave to my daughter on the day she begged us for forgiveness at the hospital. There were 52 crystals inside, representing 52 chances. Then, my daughter opened her diary. I bought it for her on the day after the fire. It contained all her thoughts and feelings during this period. Today is my first day after waking up, and the doctor uncle said I lost one kidney and can't do sports anymore. I cried and asked Daddy why I could never do my favorite running again. However, Daddy cried even harder than I did. Fortunately, there's still one happy thing. That is, Mom is willing to come back to our little home. For the first time, she kissed my forehead so gently. I'm so happy. Today is my 18th day in the hospital, and I can finally go back to school. However, I have to stop and rest after just taking a few steps. Otherwise, I would be out of breath. Seeing this, other kids abandoned me during PE class. No one wants to team up with a burden like me. I feel so sad. When no one was around, I tried hard to practice running, but ended up being sent to the hospital after passing out. Looking at Dad's guilty expression, I feel so heartbroken. I decided not to run anymore from now on. As I turned through the pages of my daughter's diary, tears streamed down my face. Unin, shall we live without Mom, okay? I looked down at my daughter's blank expression. Okay. My daughter nodded and reached out her little hand to hold mine. Feeling that bit of warmth in my hand, I made my decision instantly. I don't want Su Qian anymore. 24 hours countdown until we leave this place. Soon after, I took my daughter to the kindergarten to pack things up and handle the procedures. However, just as we arrived at the kindergarten entrance, I saw Su Qian, Bai Zhou, and Bai Nian. Bai Nian was happily playing on the slide, while Bai Zhou and Su Qian were having an intimate conversation nearby. Qian, thanks to you this time, Nian could restore her health. It's nothing. As long as Nian doesn't reject Anin's kidney, it's all worth it. Su Qian said, looking at Bai Zhou with affection in her eyes. Bai Zhou paused for a moment, then said meaningfully, if one day Zhou Jin discovers the truth, will you still think it was worth it? Hearing this, my heart tightened. I both longed to hear Su Qian's answer and felt a bit afraid. After all, this wasn't the first time Bai Zhou had made such insinuating remarks. 3 years ago, on my daughter's first day at kindergarten, Su Qian left me and Inan alone at the parent-child game activity site just because Bai Zhou said how pitiful Nian was that other kids mocked her for not having a mother. I begged her to leave later and stay with Inan until the game was finished. However, she coldly scolded me. Playing, all you know is playing. How will the child ever amount to anything? Thinking of this, I couldn't help but give a self-mocking smile. Perhaps Su Qian had never loved Inan in me. Just then, the kindergarten principal suddenly appeared behind me. Anin's father, why are you standing at the door? Come in quickly. Only then did Bai Zhou and Su Qian notice Inan and me. A flash of guilt crossed Su Qian's eyes as she nervously said, Honey, why are you here? Zhou just asked me to help him with Nian's enrollment procedures. Should we have a meal together later? That's fine. I nodded, preparing to leave with my daughter. However, at this moment, Bai Zhou, who was standing next to Su Qian, suddenly spoke. Zhou Jin, this is Anin, right? As he spoke, Bai Zhou turned to look at Bai Nian beside him. Nian, come and say hello to your sister Anin. Okay. Nian bounced over to Anin's side. Why are you moving so slowly? Like a puppet. I don't want to play with you. Nian's face was full of childlike innocence, but her eyes were filled with disdain. Hearing this, Anin's little face instantly turned bright red. Seeing this, my heart ached. Just as I was about to speak, I was interrupted by Su Qian. Children speak without filters. Nian is such a young child. She doesn't understand that after surgery, one's body becomes too weak for big movements. Besides, couldn't Nian just strengthen herself with some exercise? Hearing these words, my daughter's little face instantly turned pale, her eyes full of sadness as she looked at Su Qian. It's worth noting that just a few days ago at the hospital, Su Qian had been deeply concerned about her daughter not being able to move too much. But now she directly blamed her daughter. It turns out that when you meet the one you love, other people really don't matter anymore. I didn't want to waste any more time, so I took my daughter's hand and turned to leave. It's just withdrawal procedures. They can be handled over the phone. 18 hours countdown. Back home, I tried to distract my daughter by finding her favorite science mystery shows. Then I started packing. However, after some time, I suddenly heard my daughter crying softly. I rushed to the living room. That's when I saw my daughter holding my phone, looking at Su Qian's latest social media post. Nian is such a little Superman. The photo showed Su Qian proudly watching Bai Nian taking the top of the climbing wall. Dad, am I going to be useless forever? never able to do any sports again. My daughter looked at me with red eyes, her voice full of grievance. I felt terribly sad at that moment. I held my daughter in my arms sympathetically. Don't worry, Dad will definitely find a way to cure you. Late at night, I was about to put my daughter to bed when I heard movement at the door. I looked over. It was Su Qian who had returned. Auntie Su, your house is so big. Bai Nian's figure emerged from behind her, along with Bai Zhou. Honey, I'm back. I brought Bai Zhou and Nian Nian to our home. Su Qian's words came to an abrupt halt before she could finish. Honey, why are you packing? Where are you going? Su Qian looked at the two huge suitcases in the living room, her eyes full of anxiety. Hearing this, I replied coldly. It's nothing. I just want to take it into a sanatorium for some rehabilitation training. Oh, I see. Su Qian let out a sigh of relief. By the way, I brought Bai Zhou and Nian Nian back, so you and Nin won't be so lonely at home anymore. Is that so? Well, thanks, I said coldly. However, Su Qian's attention was entirely focused on Bai Zhou and his daughter, completely failing to notice my unusual behavior. Looking at their silhouettes together, her, Bai Zhou, and Bai Nian, like a family of three, I couldn't help but crack a bitter smile. Forget it. Let it go? After all, I won't see them again after tomorrow. I walked toward the kitchen, planning to prepare a glass of warm milk for my daughter. Just then, I suddenly heard an extremely tragic scream. I quickly ran to my daughter's bedroom. I saw my daughter lying on the floor, blood covering her forehead, breathing heavily. Meanwhile, Bai Nian stood aside, smirking with satisfaction. You little worthless thing. Come on, keep chasing me. Seeing this, I couldn't hold back anymore. While holding my daughter in my arms, I reached out to push Bai Nian out of my daughter's room. Bai Nian was instantly frightened into silence. When Bai Zhou arrived and saw the situation, his expression immediately turned unpleasant. However, when his gaze fixed on my daughter, his expression changed, and he said very smugly, Zhou Jin, my daughter's health has really improved a lot after the kidney transplant. I never expected that after I just complained a bit to Qianqian, she would go crazy searching for kidney donors all over the country. And this kidney matches Nian Nian so perfectly. With it, she's now 1,000 times healthier than before. Hearing this, Nin in my arms suddenly became quiet and stopped crying. Seeing this, Bai Zhou immediately crouched down next to me and my daughter, continuing to say, Qianqian is really capable. She found several matching kidney donors for Nian Nian right away. However, to be absolutely certain, Qianqian chose the kidney from that little girl who was the same age as Nian Nian. Zhou Jin, who would have thought that your daughter's kidney would match Nian Nian so perfectly? Upon hearing this, my face instantly turned extremely dark. I could no longer tolerate Bai Zhou's repeated provocations. I set my daughter aside, then raised my hand and gave Bai Zhou a hard slap across the face. However, after being hit, Bai Zhou wasn't angry at all. Instead, he smiled at me and said, Zhou Jin, don't get agitated. What you're pressing against is an artificial electronic heart. Be careful, if you get too excited, it might stop working. As he spoke, Bai Zhou gently stroked his chest. But I must say, this heart of yours works quite well. No wonder Qianqian won't divorce you. Of course she wants to keep such a useful organ bank like you and your daughter. Bai Zhou laughed recklessly, his gaze full of arrogance and provocation. Just then, my daughter suddenly rushed forward. Don't bully my dad. My daughter grabbed Bai Zhou's leg and bit down hard. Ah! Bai Zhou screamed in pain and hurriedly pushed my daughter away. Seeing this, I couldn't hold back anymore and clenched my fist, ready to hit Bai Zhou. At that moment, Su Qian suddenly rushed out. Slap! The room instantly fell silent. I covered my right cheek, looking at Su Qian with utter disbelief in my eyes. I'm sorry, honey, I didn't mean to hit you. Su Qian looked at me nervously, her eyes full of concern and panic. At this moment, Bai Zhou suddenly spoke up. Qianqian, I think I should leave, to avoid causing trouble with teacher Zhou Jin. Auntie Su, your husband and daughter are bullying me and hit my dad. Bai Nian also threw herself into Su Qian's arms with a wronged expression. Su Qian's expression changed instantly, her eyes full of condemnation when looking at me. Zhou Jin, I've told you that Zhou and Nian Nian have no relatives here. Why do you still bully him? Fine, since you don't welcome them, I'll have to take them to a hotel. I hope you can reflect on your actions. After saying that, Su Qian left without looking back. Looking at her departing figure, my daughter called out with sadness in her eyes. Mom, are you really leaving? Su Qian paused, then her departing steps became even more hurried. The daughter's heart instantly turned to ashes, her eyes becoming completely dim and lifeless. Nin, you still have Dad with you. I crouched down and held my daughter tightly in my arms. Dad, did it hurt when Mom hit you? My daughter looked at my right cheek with concern. Hearing this, I smiled and shook my head. It doesn't hurt. This little pain was nothing compared to the pain in my heart. 13 hours countdown. After putting my daughter to sleep, I signed my name on the printed divorce papers and left them on the living room tab. Lou. Just then, my phone suddenly rang. I looked at it. It was a photo sent by Su Qian. In the photo, she was tenderly holding Bai Nian to sleep, while Bai Zhou was standing in front of the mirror in a bathrobe, taking care of his skin. I smiled and pressed the save button. Perfect, another piece of evidence. Then I sent this photo to my lawyer. Countdown, 11 hours. The next morning, after having breakfast with my daughter, I took her to the airport. Countdown, 2 hours. As soon as we arrived at the airport, I received a WeChat message from Su Qian. Honey, I've been thinking, I was too emotional last night. I shouldn't have hit you. I apologize to you. As for Zhou and Yin Yin, if you really don't like them, I won't bring them home anymore. I bought the mango cake that you and Enan love so much. I'll be home soon. Mango cake? I couldn't help but laugh. Su Qian was really as perfunctory as ever. Both Enan and I are allergic to mangoes. Then, I turned off my phone without hesitation and boarded the plane with my daughter. Meanwhile, Su Qian, who had just arrived home, was stunned. Strange, where did they go? Su Qian muttered while sitting down on the living room sofa. When she saw the divorce papers on the table, Su Qian was dumbfounded. This is... Su Qian picked it up with trembling hands, her eyes full of disbelief. Just then, Su Qian's assistant called. Director Su, we're in trouble. Your husband must have found out about the unauthorized transplant. His lawyers have arrived at the group. After hanging up with her assistant, Su Qian quickly dialed my number. However, no matter how many times she called, the phone was always turned off. Su Qian instantly felt extreme panic. How could this happen? Su Qian said with a trembling voice, then opened my WeChat dialog box. Honey, where did you and our daughter go? There's a misunderstanding about this. I hope you can listen to my explanation. Honey, I was wrong. Please come back soon. Su Qian kept sending one message after another. However, no matter what she said, there was no response at all. The me who used to reply instantly anytime, anywhere had completely disappeared. Su Qian's legs went weak, and she collapsed onto the floor. Where did they go? Where exactly did they go? Su Qian kept mumbling, her eyes filled with fear. After some time, Su Qian stood up and started searching room by room. However, the more she searched, the more scared she became, because she discovered that she couldn't find a single item related to me or our daughter in the entire house. Su Qian completely panicked, realizing that this time it was truly over. She looked up at the large family portrait hanging in the living room and froze. In the photo, our daughter was held between me and Su Qian, with happy smiles beaming on all our faces. Honey, I will love you and Enan forever. The vow I once made to her echoed in Su Qian's ears, her eyes reddened, and tears began pouring out uncontrollably. Su Qian never imagined that I, who loved her wholeheartedly, would one day leave so decisively. Su Qian was devastated. Looking at the doll carelessly thrown on the living room floor, Su Qian's face was filled with regret. That was the birthday gift she had given to our daughter. That day, our daughter was happy for such a long time. Mom, I love you. The daughter hugged Su Qian, her eyes full of love for her mother. Unfortunately, Bai Zhou and Bai Nian returned from abroad the next day. Su Qian's attention never fell on her daughter again. Su Qian picked up the doll with trembling hands and held it tightly in her arms. She realized that her small family was completely gone. Su Qian deeply regretted. She suddenly understood why my daughter and I had been acting so strangely these days. Because we had long been prepared to leave. Su Qian's tears fell like rain. Just then, Bai Zhou called. Qian, Nian Nian suddenly has back pain. Could there be something wrong with the transplanted kidney? Please come to the hospital quickly. Hearing this, a flash of anxiety crossed Su Qian's eyes. She hurriedly ran towards the door, but accidentally tripped over a garbage bag placed at the doorway. All the garbage spilled out, including her daughter's discarded diary. That was a gift from Su Qian when her daughter first learned to hold a pen. At first, her daughter used simple drawings to record her daily life. Later, when she learned to write, she began keeping a diary. Back then, accompanying her daughter to write in the diary was the most heartwarming moment of the day for me and Su Qian. However, everything changed after Bai Zhou and Bai Nian returned to the country. Su Qian no longer had time to spend with me and our daughter. Now, Su Qian couldn't help but pick up that diary. Today is the 52nd chance that Dad and I have given Mom. But I accidentally saw Mom's WeChat messages with her assistant. They said my kidney was given to another little girl. I cried and asked Dad why. Does Mom not love me anymore? Today Dad took me to kindergarten, and I saw Mom with that little girl. She's the one who took my kidney, and she even called me a useless person who can't run. I feel so awful. Why did Mom just stand there and not want to help me? Today is the last day for my father and me in this home. That little girl pushed me down, hit me, and cursed at me. Her father even said that my father and I are organ transplant banks prepared by Mom for them. I don't understand why Mom would do this to my father and me. Isn't she afraid that we might die? I don't want Mom anymore. Reading the last line in the diary, Su Qian couldn't help but tremble all over. Unin Mo. M's good daughter. Su Qian choked up, unable to stop her tears. She felt such deep regret. She frantically hit her own head. At that moment, Bai Zhou called again. However, Su Qian hung up immediately. In less than 3 seconds, the phone rang again. This time, Su Qian pressed the answer button. Are you crazy? Don't you understand that hanging up means I don't want to talk? Why do you keep calling? What's it to me if Bai Nian has back pain? Take her to the hospital yourself. Su Qian shouted angrily, her eyes filled with rage. Then, she immediately blocked Bai Zhou's phone number. At the hospital, looking at the number that could no longer be dialed, Bai Zhou froze for a moment. Then hatred welled up in his eyes. I understand now. It must be Zhou Jin stirring up trouble. Otherwise, how could Qianqian bear to yell at me? Zhou Jin, just you wait. I'll make you regret this. Meanwhile, on the other side, as soon as I got off the plane, I took my daughter to our new home that had been prepared in advance. Then, I turned on my phone. The vibrations kept coming. Only then did I discover that Su Qian had called me more than 10 times and sent countless WeChat messages. I skimmed through them briefly, my gaze fixing on the last message. It was a voice message, and I pressed play. Husband, I regret it. I really know I was wrong. Please, I beg you to come back with an end. I can't live without you and our daughter. I promise I'll treat you both well from now on. Su Qian's voice was hoarse, choked with tears. However, my heart remained completely unmoved. After all, it was already too late. She had already been completely removed from our hearts, both mine and my daughter's. After a night's rest, I took my daughter to the best local hospital. Although I already knew the truth, my eyes still welled up with tears when the doctor said my daughter's kidney had been deliberately removed. The last glimmer of hope in my heart was shattered. So, Su Qian could really be this cruel. I was devastated beyond words. If it weren't for me, my daughter wouldn't have suffered like this. My heart convulsed repeatedly, and I was in such pain that I could barely breathe. The next second, everything went black, and I completely lost consciousness. When I came to again, I was lying in a hospital bed. Mr. Zhou, you must not let your emotions fluctuate so drastically in the future, as it will severely affect the lifespan of your artificial heart. The doctor said with a serious expression. I understand. I nodded, my face expressionless. After the doctor left the room, I looked at my daughter beside me. Anan, Mom has done so many wrong things. Would you be sad if Dad lets her face punishment? Dad, I don't have a mom anymore. I only have you. Anan said with reddened eyes. Whatever you do, I support you, Dad. Hearing this, I no longer had any hesitation in my heart. I dialed my lawyer's number. I'll send you the hospital's test results shortly. Get ready to sue Su Qian and the Su Corporation. Meanwhile, on the other side, Bai Nian had been hospitalized for exactly 1 week. During this time, Bai Zhou couldn't get through to Su Qian's phone no matter how many times he tried. He was extremely frustrated. He decided to go find Su Qian. However, just as he arrived at the entrance of Su Corporation, he saw Su Qian and her assistant. Bai Zhou noticed they seemed to be arguing. He immediately hid to the side and started eavesdropping. Chairman Su, I told you from the beginning that unauthorized transplant was illegal, but you wouldn't listen. Now look what's happened. We've received a legal notice at the company. I didn't expect Zhou Jin would discover this matter. Su Qian rubbed her brow and sighed. The only solution now is for you to take full responsibility for this. Don't worry, I'll find a way to get you out and give you enough money to last a lifetime. Miss Su, have you lost your mind? The assistant was shocked. This is a serious crime that could lead to decades in prison. How could you possibly get me out? Besides, Mr. Zhou is suing everyone. You, me, the company, the doctors, Bai Zhou, even that child is included. Hearing this, Bai Zhou suddenly panicked. He hurriedly rushed in front of them, saying nervously, What did you say? That good-for-nothing Zhou Jin has sued all of us. This wouldn't have happened if you had kept your mouth shut. How else would Zhou Jin know the truth about everything? Su Qian glared at Bai Zhou impatiently. If Bai Zhou hadn't been so stupid, they wouldn't have gotten into such big trouble. Thinking of this, Su Qian's hatred towards Bai Zhou grew even more intense, and her gaze towards him was filled with disgust. Seeing this, Bai Zhou pressed his lips together and said somewhat nervously, So what do we do now? Qianqian, I don't know. Su Qian replied coldly. I can't get in touch with Zhou Jin at all now, so I can't even negotiate with him. What? Bai Zhou raised his eyebrows, his face full of anger. I won't take responsibility for this matter anyway. You were the one who insisted on doing this. Don't try to make me take the blame. Bai, how can you be so heartless? Didn't Director Su do all this for you? The assistant beside them said indignantly. So what? I didn't force her to do it. Even if there's responsibility, mine should be the smallest. Hearing these words, Su Qian's gaze turned cold. She never expected that after giving her heart and soul for Bai Zhou and his daughter Bai Nian, when something went wrong, this would be Bai Zhou's attitude. In an instant, Su Qian became utterly disappointed in him. At this moment, the little assistant was still arguing with Bai Zhou. You think you can escape? I'm telling you that according to the law, both your and your daughter's organs must be given back. Why should we? My daughter and I have used them for so long. How can we return them? Bai Zhou's face turned fierce. Besides, when the surgery was done, both the doctor and hospital knew about it. They should also pay the price. Anyway, I'm innocent. I didn't know these organs were illegally transplanted. Upon hearing this, Su Qian's body swayed. She never expected Bai Zhou to be so heartless and ungrateful. To evade responsibility, he was telling nothing but lies. Su Qian instantly felt extreme regret. She couldn't understand if she had gone mad back then, hurting her loving husband and daughter for someone like this. Su Qian could no longer control her emotions and raised her hand to give Bai Zhou a hard slap. You dare to hit me? Bai Zhou's eyes were full of disbelief. Get out. I never want to see you again. Su Qian said coldly. Fine. Don't regret it. Bai Zhou turned and left. However, when he returned to the hospital, he immediately regretted it. He was terrified that once he left, Su Qian would push all the blame onto him. The more Bai Zhou thought about it, the more panicked he became. At dawn the next day, he withdrew all the money from Su Qian's account and fled far away with Bai Nian. Su Qian didn't know about this. She was busy finding someone to delete some crucial evidence records. I returned to the country with my daughter the day before the trial. That evening, Su Qian had her final meeting with the lawyer in his office. Director Su, I've reviewed all the evidence and materials several times. The lawyer paused, hesitating to continue. Seeing this, Su Qian waved her hand. How is it? Just tell me straight. Upon hearing this, the lawyer lowered his head. Director Su, the opposing party is extremely well prepared. Every piece of evidence they have could completely destroy our case. For this trial, I can only do my best to help everyone avoid the death penalty. Upon hearing these words, Su Qian was stunned. Avoid a death sentence? She never expected things would become this serious. At this moment, the lawyer continued. Director Su, please remember, during tomorrow's court session, you must speak as little as possible and absolutely avoid giving the opposing lawyer any leverage. As for Mr. Bai Zhou and Miss Bai Nian, you must warn them. No matter what, they must firmly maintain that they accepted the anonymous donation without knowing anything about it. Otherwise, the definition of the entire case will become even more serious. So everyone must be extremely careful with their words. Listening to the lawyer's repeated warnings, Su Qian became increasingly anxious. She wasn't sure if something would go wrong tomorrow. Subsequently, Su Qian hurriedly rushed to the villa she had prepared for Bai Zhou and his daughter. However, the place was already empty. Looking at the vacant rooms, Su Qian instantly understood. Bai Zhou had run away. He had abandoned her without any hesitation and fled. Su Qian couldn't help but give a self-mocking smile. She was willing to break the law for Bai Zhou and his daughter, but what about them? At this moment, Su Qian felt the irony was beyond measure. Thinking about how just an hour ago she had exhausted all her connections and resources trying to get Bai Zhou and Bai Nian out of this situation, Su Qian felt like a complete fool. She was furious. Without hesitation, Su Qian took out her phone and purchased a wanted notice on the black market. She wanted to make Bai Zhou and his daughter Bai Nian regret abandoning her for the rest of their lives. On the day of the court hearing, my daughter and I saw Su Qian again. However, this time, we were standing on opposite sides. Honey, where have you been all these days? Do you know how worried I've been about you and Anin? Su Qian's eyes turned red as soon as she appeared. I know I went too far before. Honey, please forgive me one last time. You and Anin. I'm begging you. Watching Su Qian crying bitterly, I suddenly thought of the day after the fire. At that time, she apologized and showed remorse just like she's doing now. And now, it's the same old trick again. I felt utterly disgusted. Seeing that I wasn't moved, Su Qian turned her attention to our daughter. Anin, won't you help Mommy? Mommy knows she was wrong, and Mommy promises she'll never make such a mistake again. Please, Mommy begs you, help me persuade Daddy. I don't have a mother, our daughter said expressionlessly while looking at Su Qian. Su Qian froze upon hearing this. The court hearing went very smoothly, and because of Bai Zhou's evasion, the entire case became even clearer. The trial ended in less than half an hour. Su Qian lost. She and all other involved parties were taken away by the police. Before leaving, Su Qian looked at me and our daughter, saying with a guilty expression, I'm sorry. My daughter and I ignored her and walked towards the exit of the court. Due to the heinous nature of the case, it quickly drew public attention. On the day the verdict was announced, the Su Group, a long-standing business empire, came crashing down. My daughter and I returned abroad. Fortunately, my daughter and I were matched with suitable heart and kidney donors. We underwent legal and compliant transplant surgeries. After the surgery, neither my daughter nor I experienced any organ discomfort, and our recovery was remarkably fast. 3 months later, I received a CD. I put it into the CD player, and it contained a video. The main characters were Bai Zhou and Bai Nian. They were enjoying sunbathing on the beach. At that moment, a group of foreign men suddenly knocked them unconscious and dragged them into a car. Bai Zhou and Bai Nian were taken to a very desolate place. Whips, clubs, burning coals. They endured various forms of torture, too horrific to watch. By the time the police arrived, they had already breathed their last. Seeing this, I shook my head with a smile. Indeed, people should never do evil things. Karma will come back to them. 5 months later, I received a letter from a prison in China. Inside was a divorce agreement signed by Su Qian, documents gifting all assets, and a note. The note read, "I'm sorry, I no longer have the chance to make it up to you in this life. I hope in my next life I can still be your wife and Unin's mother." Upon seeing this, I immediately threw the note into the trash bin. Next life? I hope that no matter how many lifetimes pass, I never encounter Su Qian again. Afterward, I converted all the assets gifted by Su Qian into cash and deposited them in the bank.